Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on your time zone, and welcome to today's webinar, BRCGS Food Safety Issue 9, What's New? My name's Amy. I'm a member of the marketing team here at the Perry Johnson Companies, and I'll be helping to facilitate today's webinar and offer technical support to our speaker. Today, we're welcoming back Jessica Burke of BRCGS, who's helped us before with other BRCGS-related webinars, and she'll be introduced to you momentarily. But just before we get started, I wanted to remind all of our attendees that you will be on mute for the duration of the session to ensure audio quality and adequate bandwidth. However, we absolutely do want to take any questions that you might have regarding the material discussed. Some of the most common questions we get that aren't related to the material today are regarding the availability of the slides and whether the broadcast is being recorded. I'm happy to say that our slides from today will be available for download from the PJRFSI website, and we are indeed recording the session, so anyone who was unable to join us, or if you have to skip out early, you'll be able to rewatch with the full voiceover and complete Q&A free of charge on the PJRFSI YouTube channel. Just give us about 24 to 48 hours to upload the recording, and it'll be available for you to review or to share with your colleagues if they were unable to join us as well. And as I mentioned, we do absolutely encourage the asking of questions, comments, concerns, anything. And to do that, you'll just go into the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen, and you go to the questions or the question and answer tab. And if you click the triangle on the left-hand side of the tab, it should drop down a menu with an input that looks like this. If you type your question into that lower box down there, go ahead and click send. It'll come right over to us on our side. And once we reach the end of the prepared presentation, we will go ahead and answer as many questions as we have time for. You don't have to wait until the end to ask any questions. So please, as you think of things, go ahead and type them in and send them our way so that we can answer all of your burning questions. But without any further ado, I'm going to hand the reins over to Jessica Burke for her presentation. So Jessica, you can go ahead and take it away whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you so much, Amy, and thanks to PJRFSI for having me back again. I'm really excited to be here today to take you through the key changes of Food Safety Issue 8 to Issue 9. So just really quickly about myself, I am the Delivery Partner Relationship Manager for BRCGS. I actually began my career in environmental and food testing, so worked in a lab for a number of years, and then moved on to manufacturing, where I helped a couple of facilities improve their food safety systems and achieve GFSI benchmark certification. And then from there, I moved on to the world of certification. So I've worked across multiple roles in BRCGS, including technical specialist for the gluten-free certification program and plant-based standard, as well as senior technical manager for the Americas region. And then in my current role as Delivery Partner Relationship Manager, I support our BRCGS delivery partners in delivering world-class service through collaboration, facilitation, as well as technical education. So that's enough about me, and now we will get into the topic that you're all here to hear about. So this just sort of gives you an idea of the current status of the food standard. We do have more than 22,000 certified sites and a 5.3% year-over-year growth rate. We operate in 126 countries around the world, with the top being Italy, followed by the UK, and then China. And we currently work with over 74 approved certification bodies around the world. So to give you an overview of the Food 9 timeline, and obviously most of this is behind us now, but basically the standard interpretation guideline and key changes document were published. Those were available as of August 1st. And we've since then also published a few of the other publications and will be publishing more shortly. And I'll take you through those a little bit later in the presentation. ATP training took place in September, and then auditor and site training began in October and is still taking place now. Audits will begin February 1st, 2023, and I will say that this is a firm cutoff date, which means that if you have your audit on January 31st, it will be to issue 8, and if you have it on February 1st, it will be to issue 9. So as you can imagine, a lot goes into developing our standards, and the food standard is no different. So it actually starts as soon as the previous standard launches, because we look at any information that's been collected throughout the life of the standard. We receive a great deal of feedback through things like email inquiries, our certification bodies, and then a formal public consultation of the draft standard. All of this feedback and information is then shared with the BRCGS standards team and the technical working group, which consists of international stakeholders, food manufacturers, retailers, food service companies, certification bodies, as well as independent technical experts. So the focus of attention for this particular rewrite has been encouraging a better understanding and further development of product safety culture, ensuring global applicability and alignment with the revised version of Codex General Principles of Food Hygiene, which was released in 2020, and of course to ensure alignment with the Global Food Safety Initiative benchmark, or GFSI. We've also expanded our audit options to include ICT. We learned a great deal about the use of ICT throughout the pandemic, and we've taken these key learnings and incorporated them right into the standard protocol. Another key theme is the enhancement of core product safety activities, such as internal audits and root cause analysis. And then lastly, we've provided greater clarity for sites completing animal primary conversion and producing animal feed. Another thing we always consider is trends related to our top non-conformities. So these are the top non-conformities for issue 8. And we also collect a lot of data around these non-conformities, and we've noticed that there is a repeat trend of many of the same non-conformities year after year. And when we look at the associated corrective action and preventive action plans, we have to ask ourselves how many of these would still occur if the fundamentals of product safety were actually enhanced. And so the next question is, what are the key fundamental concepts that would lead to stronger food safety management systems? The ones that issue 9 focuses on are internal audits, root cause analysis, validation and verification, risk assessment, incident management, and traceability. Although issue 8 covered these concepts, issue 9 just goes into a lot more detail, and the ambiguity has been removed from issue 9. This will enable sites to enhance their basic fundamental controls, and hopefully this will mean a reduction in the frequency of these basic non-conformities that we see. So this is a really high-level overview of the key changes to requirements from issue 8 to 9. In summary, they are product safety culture, HACCP, outsourced processing, root cause analysis, food defense, equipment, and animal primary conversion. But we are going to go over each of these in detail over the course of the presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, we've also made changes to the protocol with the addition of blended audits and mandatory 1 and 3 unannounced audits. Now, these are not new concepts, and the options were already available and documented in position statements. However, we've just incorporated them right into the standard. So let's go over the key changes to the requirements. So the first one is on food safety and quality culture. Food safety and quality culture has been a theme of many presentations over the years, and still is. And we decided to include it within issue 8 of the standard because we firmly believe that the culture within a company strongly impacts the ability to maintain and improve food safety and quality processes. In fact, analysis of the root causes of many nonconformities across various versions of the standard demonstrates that A proactive, positive product safety and quality culture within a company can make all the difference in the effectiveness of the food safety and quality plan and its consistent implementation throughout the site. So the clause doesn't prescribe the exact mechanisms that need to be used, and this is to allow the site flexibility to develop systems that are effective within their specific ways of working and the current culture prevailing within the site. It does, however, highlight the minimum scope of the plan. So looking at the exact clause itself, it is structured similar to issue 8. However, you'll see we have defined some of the activities that must be included in your food safety culture plan. And one of the things that was identified by the issue 9 working group is the influence of behaviors on culture. And for this reason, behaviors is now included right in the clause itself. And these relevant behaviors may be identified simply by managers or supervisors' knowledge of the site through a site survey or artifacts of the behaviors, beliefs, or attitudes that exist at a site. However, we do want to be very clear that we're not expecting the auditors to be auditing the food safety culture itself of the site. Rather, they'll be looking at the detail of the plan itself, how the activities were identified, how they were developed and measured, a review of the effectiveness of the completed activities and actions based on results of the measurements, as well as a review of the plan itself. The second key change that has been made is to section 2, which is the HACCP section. The clauses in section 2 have been updated to reflect the latest Codex HACCP principles. And so this shouldn't be a major change for sites that already have a robust HACCP system in place. And most of the changes to Codex were already part of section 2. But one thing we do want to highlight and that we receive a lot of questions on is around terminology used in certain regions of the world. So sites are advised to avoid having multiple plans with different terminology. Alternative terminology is acceptable by the standard, provided the requirements have been fully met, but it's not necessary. Multiple plans are okay if the site feels it's necessary for themselves for their own operational requirements, but it's certainly not a requirement of the standard. And then one other thing I wanted to mention here is that there's been a change in terminology from the term sanitizing to disinfection, and you'll see that heavily throughout section 2. To go into a bit more detail behind one of the key changes made to section 2 as a result of Codex. Codex has published extensive guidance on the validation of food safety controls. And based on this, Food 9 includes a new requirement to validate HACCP or food safety plans prior to any changes which may affect product safety to ensure that the plan will effectively control the identified hazards before implementation. Now, much of this is already part of issue 8. However, issue 9 is a bit more prescriptive about the need to validate and document prior to implementation of any changes that would affect food safety. And so validation in this context could include a range of activities depending on hazards, such as review of literature, validation studies, guidance received from local authorities or legislation. The key is that the site must have a mechanism to capture and review each and every change. Where sites already have effective HACCP plans in place, validation can certainly be achieved using processes developed in accordance with clauses 212.2 and 212.3 of issue 9. Outsourced processing has undergone a revamp, and this is an area which has caused quite a bit of confusion in the previous versions of the standard. We did update this section in issue 9. However, the feedback was that this is still an area that's unclear, and further updating was required to add some clarity. This is a vital process that can obviously have a huge impact on your product safety processes. So we've updated this section quite significantly, specifically around the definition. We've updated the statement of intent, and there are new requirements that have been built in to ensure that any risks associated with this process are included in a site's HACCP plan, and that there is clear visibility and an agreed specification with the outsourced processing supplier to ensure no risk to your products. So this slide provides an overview of the definition of outsourced processing. So it's basically when an intermediate step such as production, processing, packing, or storage is completed at another company or site. So basically, the example would be if raw materials are received on site, some of the processing steps are then completed at your site, then the product or partially processed product goes out to another site for another part of the process, and then it's returned back to your site. And then there's a further step, which could include processing, packing, or storage. And so if all of those conditions are met, then that would fall under outsourced processing. If your raw materials receive additional storage or processing steps prior to first arriving at your site, this is not considered to be outsourced processing, but should be managed by the site using supplier approval mechanisms, raw material risk assessments, and raw material specifications. And then if the entire process is completed off-site, that would be potentially considered contract packing, and that would be controlled under the management of services. So basically, this also shows, this diagram shows how traded products is also different from outsourced processing. So again, for an outsourced process, raw materials received, some sort of process takes place at the site, and then some part of that goes off-site to another company and then is returned to your site for additional processing, packing, storage, etc. If the product leaves the site and all of the manufacturing processes are carried out by another site and never returns to your site and then goes directly to distribution, that will fall under contract packing, which is considered a service in the standard and should be managed as such. And then if a site purchases a product, stores it, and then intends on selling it, that would be considered a traded good. So for traded goods, and how it's different from an outsourced process is that for traded goods, you purchase strictly with the intention to sell, whereas with an outsourced process, it's that intermediate step that we're talking about that's completed off-site and then comes back for final distribution. Bear with me. Okay, so another key area that we have updated is root cause analysis. Although issue 9 has not introduced any majorly new themes, there is a big focus on the evolution of existing core product safety practices. And these are practices that we believe, when strengthened, will lead to things like improved food safety practices, decreased complaints, and improved culture at the site level. In addition, they may also lead to a decrease in the number of repeat top 10 non-conformances that we saw on that previous slide. And to just sort of give you some context, the top 10 non-conformities account for just 5.6% of the clauses in the standard, but they account for 30% of all of the NCs that are raised. So root cause analysis is one of these core product safety concepts that we felt needed to be enhanced and is an extremely important tool to prevent reoccurrence and promote continual improvement. A number of clauses in the standard specifically require root cause analysis, so we reviewed all of those clauses to ensure a consistent approach and better linkage to other sections for continual improvement. However, it is still up to the sites to establish a procedure for its completion of the root cause analysis. And the things that you would want to include in this procedure would be a set of parameters that will initiate the use of the appropriate tool, whichever tool it is that you choose, or combination of tools, who is trained and or authorized to complete the analysis, the methods that the site will use to conduct the analysis, the records which detail the analysis and any subsequent preventive actions, the methods for the verification of the completed actions. And so basically the auditor is going to expect to see a documented procedure that includes all of that information, as well as evidence of any root cause analysis and preventive actions that the site has carried out. So we are all familiar with this approach to problem solving. It's all about blame, hiding issues, looking the other way, and firefighting. So obviously an approach like this is not going to address the root cause of any issue or prevent reoccurrence. And although I think we have come a long way, unfortunately this type of approach can often still be seen in industry. So root cause analysis is designed to introduce a logical problem-solving process. It's looking for the process or system that failed or allowed the non-conformity to occur. So it's not the blame game. We're not looking for who, but what. While it's always tempting to assume we know what happened, any hypothesis should be tested for accuracy rather than assumed. So basically, don't jump to conclusions without the supporting facts. It's also important to note that root cause analysis is a completely different process to incident management and immediate corrective action, although these activities are often completed in close proximity, but they must be considered as separate processes to avoid confusion. The overarching aim is to introduce action, which eliminates the cause and prevents recurrence. So there are a few different techniques and tools that you can use to complete your root cause analysis, and this isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all situation. The tool that you decide to use will depend on the complexity of the issue, and you may even need to use a combination of tools. So the 5 whys technique is the simplest method, and it's a question asking method used to explore the cause and effect relationships underlying the problem, where the investigator just keeps asking the question why until a meaningful conclusion is reached. Although the method suggests a minimum of 5 questions be asked, it's really important to continue asking those additional questions until the real cause has been identified, rather than drawing a partial conclusion. And then another tool is the fishbone, whose name comes from the form the diagram takes as it's constructed. This is the most useful when the 5 whys technique is too basic. For example, where a complex issue needs to be considered in bite-sized pieces, or where there's a lot of data that needs to be trended. One of the key aspects of this type of root cause analysis is to visually lay out the causes of the problem. It works by breaking down the various aspects of the problem to allow the investigator to consider one section at a time and to visualize the relevant information. Another key change is to food defense. Basically, we have put more of an emphasis on food defense by separating it from site security and mirroring the food fraud section. This encourages sites to adopt rigorous food defense systems and enables sites to choose to consider the 2 topics of food fraud and food defense together. But despite this new emphasis, the changes to the requirements are not dramatic, and if you have an existing system in place that meets the requirements of issue 8, then most of the requirements for issue 9 will also be met. And then section 4.6, equipment, has undergone a major revamp. And this is because the topic of equipment design and its suitability for use in food manufacturing, which is commonly referred to as hygienic design, has developed considerably since the publication of issue 8. So we basically just updated this section to reflect current best practices in the industry and to be in line with legislative requirements that have been recently updated. So to give you a couple of examples of those legislative requirements, there's EN 162/2009 for food processing machinery, ISO 14159/2002, which is safety and hygienic design of machinery, and a new benchmark published by GFSI around building and equipment manufacturers and building and equipment users. Most of the learnings and suggestions from these documents have basically been now taken into consideration in this section of the standard. So this means that the requirements now take into consideration the purchase of new, refurbished, and secondhand equipment. There's a new clause on installation or commissioning. However, I do want to note here that the expectation is not that sites go overboard with their controls. This should be proportional to the complexity of equipment and the product safety risk. The controls that are put in place should always be based on risk. There are clauses on mobile equipment to ensure that product safety is maintained when a piece of equipment is moved from one area to another. There's also a clause on managing the movement of static equipment to ensure that food safety is managed and the integrity of the equipment is maintained. There are additional requirements that must be completed by the site where battery charging equipment is in use. And there's also a number of clauses within the standard which may need to be considered in conjunction with this section, such as equipment maintenance, calibration of new equipment, and new products and processes. So a new section, 5.9, animal primary conversion, has been added, although the requirements are not all necessarily new. We have put the requirements neatly into one section to make it easier for sites and auditors to identify all the clauses related to this process. So for issue 8, this information was contained in a separate position statement to reflect the GFSI benchmark, but now it's just incorporated directly into the standard. So there are a couple of things to highlight here. Some countries do have specific legislative requirements around prohibited substances. This is now considered as a clause within this section, and sites are expected to operate a system that complies with these legislative requirements. Traceability, obviously important for food safety and legality requirements for all food products. And this includes all edible parts of the carcass. So sites must have some systems in place to meet this as well. And lastly, sites should confirm post-slaughter times and temperature to ensure product safety. Again, this was all within the position statement. Now we've just incorporated it directly into the standard. So that was all a very high level overview of the key changes to the requirements. However, you can find more detail in the key changes document, which you can find on the store on our website or participate using your Participate access. So moving on to the key changes of the protocol, no majorly new changes to the protocol, but again, what we have done, what we've added to issue 9 is already outlined in position statements for issue 8. We've just incorporated the detail into the standard. So the first update is the 1 and 3 unannounced audit protocol. So basically, due to the added confidence provided by unannounced audits, the GFSI benchmark version 2020 introduced a new requirement for all sites to have at least one unannounced audit every 3 years. Obviously, because this is a GFSI requirement, it means that all certification program owners must follow this rule. We do understand that there may be some challenging situations, for example, with seasonal sites, and we have addressed those in a supplementary document, BRCGS 079. So take a look at that if that applies to you. And then the next change is the introduction of blended audits. So this is a 2-part audit where the first part of the audit is completed remotely, followed by an on-site within 28 days. This option has already been in place for some time and documented in a position statement. Basically, the option provides flexibility to the sites. However, it is just an option, it's not mandatory. Sites can still have a fully on-site audit if they choose to. I should also mention that for the blended audit option, sites are still required to have one unannounced audit every 3 years, and this would need to be completed completely on-site. So this is basically a simple overview of the audit options available. So as a reminder, the announced option includes the mandatory unannounced audit every 3 years, meaning that sites with annual audits will have at least every third audit as unannounced. And then sites that are on a C or D grade will also be expected to undertake an unannounced audit every 3 years, but they may have more announced audits in the interim. And then, of course, there's the blended audit, blended announced, which we have talked about, and the unannounced audit, the voluntary unannounced audit, which has been part of the program for some time. So this is a list of the publications for 2022. So of course, the standard interpretation guide and key changes was all made available on August 1st. And then we have also updated to include the additional voluntary modules. So we've got Global Gap, Meat Supply Chain, and FSMA. And then we'll be continuing to update those throughout the year. And this isn't a complete list because we will be working on some throughout 2023 as well. So keep your eyes open for those. So that was a very high level overview of the key changes to issue 9. And again, we do have a number of documents available to help you, as well as training courses. And that's our email address if you have any questions about the conversion or anything in general. And so with that, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope that was helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica, for that great presentation. I honestly really appreciate you taking the time to go in. And I know you say that's very high level, but to me, it seemed very in-depth. And even as I was following along, all the questions that were coming to me, you answered them within the next couple of slides. That was perfect.
Amazing. That's fantastic. I'm so glad.
To our audience, please get those questions in case you missed it at the beginning. The questions or the question and answer tab, whichever it's labeled on your screen. You can go in there and type your questions in if you have any for Jess to answer. But Jess, I know one topic that we've been talking about a lot at PJRFSI is the release of the final rule on food traceability from the FDA. Does the food defense section still align now that that's released?
Yeah, so that's actually something that, so we put out a bit of a paper on that before it was released back in the summer. And so we've been sort of looking at not just the food standard, but also the storage and distribution standard and potentially agents and brokers. You know, we sort of have to do a deep dive into that. So we're still sort of working on that, but there will be more to come, definitely. It's a project that's on our radar.
Yeah, it's definitely a doozy of a document to go through, I'm sure.
Yes.
Now,
Absolutely.
going back to the topic of root cause and root cause analysis, I know that's a very hot topic, not just with food safety, but also, you know, the webinars that I do with PJR, so, you know,
Mhm.
Quality Management System Certification, we have a webinar regarding root cause analysis. Are there any recommended resources that you can point people towards that are more geared toward food safety rather than manufacturing and industry when it comes to root cause analysis and how to thoroughly perform one?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mean to, you know, toot our own horn, but we do have some
Toot away,
resources.
Jess. Toot away, Jess. You guys do a great job.
We have resources on our website. So we do have a best practice guideline for root cause analysis. And any site which is certified will have access to Participate, which is it's like our library, our online library, and that document is available there. If you're not already certified, it can also be purchased on the store. But in addition to that, we've also got training courses and one of which is root cause analysis, and that takes you through all of the different tools that can be used and examples of how to perform those. So, you know, for me, those would be the two go-to tools that I would suggest.
Fantastic. And hey, maybe PJRFSI needs to put together a food safety root cause webinar in the next year or so.
There we go. Perfect.
We would love to see it. All right. I haven't seen any other questions come through from the audience. If you're maybe if you're a little shy to ask questions and you have some background inklings of questions you might want to ask later, I absolutely encourage you to reach out to Jess. That email, as she said, is on the screen right now. Take a picture with your mobile phone, take a screenshot on your computer, whatever you need to do to get that question answered. Jess, I'm going to say we can wrap things up here. We'll keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Any parting words of wisdom for the audience?
All I would say is it's not that scary. The changes are not that scary. I think if you already have a great food safety system in place, then you'll be just fine. So don't panic, and just make sure to use all the resources that you have at your fingertips that I talked about earlier, including the key changes document. That's a really great one to sort of show you all of the differences between each of the standards. And yeah, I think that's probably it.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Jess. It was great to work with you on a webinar again. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss all this with our subscribers, and I hopefully we get a lot of traction with this on our YouTube channel. As I said at the beginning, the recording will be available for review for free on our YouTube channel, usually within a day or so of the conclusion of the presentation. But for now, I'm going to sign off and wish everybody a happy and healthy rest of their week. If you're in the States, happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Thanks so much.